Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so we did the
fruit and the date palm.
We did that one, yeah?
Yeah. And this bit underneath.
We did the Ilqa al-Hajar, throwing the stones.
Yeah. And what else?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلَا يَجُوزُ بَيْءُ ثَوْبٍ مِنْ ثَوْبَيْنِ. So this literally means we don't. If you take the literal meaning, it means this: you are not allowed to sell. A person is not allowed to sell one cloth from two cloths. Now you see, this is why you need to study fiqh from someone who's trained, and not just fiqh, any science really. Because if you just read the text, you could get very confused, and it could cause you to make errors in understanding what the fuqaha was saying. So the masla is not talking about what literally it says. The masla is actually referring to if a person is telling two cloths together, the cloths come together. Yeah, so the two cloths, like for example, sometimes you buy trousers and shirt together, they come as one item. Yeah, so they come together, but it's one item. So on the receipt, you only have one item in the list. Yeah, trousers and shirt, or sometimes you get two gloves. Yeah, pair of gloves for £5, or you get shoes together. So anything you buy which comes together. So you paid one sum for both of them, and add this condition to it as well, that the price of each item is not mentioned separately. The price of each item is not mentioned separately. Yeah, so in this case, you're not allowed to sell one of the cloths from the two without mentioning the price of each one. Because why? Yeah. So because if you don't mention the price of each one, it's 'cause you're not going to know how much you're paying. It might be written down, both of them cost £100. One might be £99 and the other one might be £1. Yeah, so you don't know. And the other thing is, another explanation of this masla is, لا يجوز بيع ثوب من ثوبين means that there's two cloths there, and you're buying one, but you haven't stipulated which one you're buying. Yeah, so you say, I'm buying one of them, here's the money. So now, when you pay the money, what's going to happen? You might go for one, and the shopkeeper says, no, I thought you were talking about this one. Make sense? Yeah, so one could be good quality, one could be bad quality. So you have to, the shopkeeper has to say, this one is for this much, and this one is for this much. Which one do you want to buy? He goes, I want to buy this one. He goes, fine, deal, pay the money. Then there's no argument. But if, for example, like there's two items there, TV there, yeah, and there's a toothpick there, and you say, these items are, I'm selling this to you, you want to buy it? He goes, yeah. So he pays the money, and then he says, no, I'm in the toothpick. And the customer saying, no, I want the TV. And cause argument. وَلَا يَجُوزُ بَيْءُ ثَوْبٍ مِنْ ثَوْبَيْنِ. So basically this is to do with uncertainty.
So if there's two identical items, like you buy a pack of two shirts, it's got to be the price. Can you not like give half the price for one of them?
If in the contract that's what's been agreed. So if that's been agreed, for example, like if you go to Asda Tesco, they have written down, they have lots of things and they have written down, each one is for 50p. So that means that when you buy it, on the receipt, it'll come down as 50p, 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 the number you buy. Make sense? Yeah, but if they have like a pack of two, and you say no, I want only one. Yeah, then you can't, because there's no agreement being made, because they might want to sell two because that's the way they get rid of their stock. And you're saying, no, I want one. Yeah, so it doesn't work like that. Does that make sense? Okay, next masla. Okay, remember I told you before, in transactions, conditions being stipulated are not allowed. Yeah, remember I mentioned this? Conditions in transactions, I said to you, there's conditions which are in accordance with the transaction, there's conditions which are strengthening the transaction, conditions which are accepted by, which go against the transaction but they're accepted by the society, and the transactions or conditions which go against the transaction, which are not accepted by the society. And I said to you, these are two types. Yeah, those which have a benefit for the customer, the shopkeeper, or the item, or those that do not have benefit for anyone. Remember this? Yeah? So, I'll just write this down. If you haven't written it down, write it down. But make sure, I'm not going to read it again, guys. Make sure you learn it. So, conditions are, remember, when you're buying an item in a shop, the transaction has to be a free transaction. As in, it has to be a transaction where you're not obliging, you're not forcing, compelling someone to accept something which they're not happy with. So any sort of condition in a transaction, if it's making someone, forcing someone to accept something which is not part of the transaction, that should not be allowed. Like for example, if I go to a shop to buy a bike, and I say to the shopkeeper, I want to buy this bike, and he says, I'm going to sell you this bike on the condition you allow me to ride it whenever I want. That's forcing me to do something which goes totally against what the transaction is all about. Make sense? Yeah. Or for example, like if I go to shops and I say to them, I want to buy, this chocolate bar, and the shopkeeper says, okay, I'll sell you the chocolate bar on the condition that you also buy this from me as well. So he's forcing me to buy something which goes against transaction, because the transaction demands I should only have to pay for the chocolate bar. So a condition which is conforms with the contract. Like for example, if I go to a shop and I say to the shopkeeper, I'll buy this chocolate bar of you on the condition that you hand it over to me. That's fine. Yeah, because that's what happens in transactions. The shopkeeper hands over his product, his mabi, to you. Makes sense? So that kind of, or for example, like, I'm going to buy this chocolate bar for 50 pence on the condition that I have to only pay 50 pence. That's fine, because that's what the transaction is all about. So you're not adding anything extra to the transaction. You're just reiterating what the transaction says. Okay, number 2 is a condition which strengthens the transaction, like it builds confidence in the transaction. So for example, like if I go to the shops and I say to the shopkeeper, look, I want to buy this chocolate bar on the condition that you get it off the shelf for me and give it to me. Yes, that's fine, even though that's not part of the contract. But what does that do? That's strange, because by him climbing up and getting it for me, that allows me to benefit from the product that I bought. Yeah, or for example, like, you buy something in a shop and you say to the shopkeeper, I want to buy this off you on the condition that you open the wrapper for me. It's like sealed, and you want them to open the wrapper. Or sometimes you buy like a Coke can and you ask them, I want you to open it for me. That's fine, because that is allowing the other person to benefit from the item. Or for example, you go to a restaurant and he says to you, sorry, we don't take credit card, but can you go to the cash point outside and get cash and bring it to us? So that's the only way that this is that strengthening the transaction.
Would the same thing apply if you said, I'll buy it, but if you deliver it to me?
Okay, that's going to come third one now. Have we got that? Number 3, the third one now. So this second type is allowed. The third type is a condition which goes against the contract. Yeah, it's against the contract. It does not fall into the contract. For example, like I go to a shop and I say to them, I want to buy the chocolate bar off you on the condition that you give me a carrier bag to carry it. He doesn't have to give me a carrier bag. That carrier bag costs him. He has to pay for it, and I'm getting it free of charge. So therefore, this should be something that shouldn't be allowed, because I am making necessary upon him something which was not part of the contract. Yeah. Or for example, like I'll buy this off you on the condition that you, if something's wrong with my phone, I can bring it back to you and you can, swap it with another one. Yeah. Or money back guarantee. So this condition technically should not be allowed, but because this is socially acceptable, society, no one has a problem with it. Nowadays, you buy things, they give you a free guarantee with it, free warranty with it. Yeah, they'll even free of charge delivery to your house, and you expect that from them.
So this is allowed if you say, I'll buy it if you give me a...
Yeah, it's allowed, because socially it's allowed. If the society accepts it, then it's allowed, because it's not a burden upon the buyer or the seller. Everyone got that? Right, number 4 is if a condition goes against the contract, what the contract's all about. Yeah, it goes against what the contract's all about. and is not accepted in society overall. Yeah, so this one is where, so it's important to remember this, there is benefit for either the buyer or the seller or the product. How? For example, like I go to the shop and I say to the shopkeeper, I'm going to buy this chocolate bar of you, okay, on the condition that you have to stand on one leg and hop all the way down to my house, and you got to open this wrapper and you got to spend your whole day giving it to me whenever I want it. Yeah, so nowhere in society this is accepted. That's putting a burden upon the seller which is not part of the contract, and it's socially it's not acceptable. So therefore this condition would nullify the entire contract. Contract becomes nullified, cancelled. And if you want to do it again, you got to repeat the contract. Likewise, if the condition that's stipulated is from the seller, yeah, so the seller, for example, I go to the shop and I buy from him a laptop. I buy this laptop and the seller says to me, okay, I'll sell you the laptop on the condition that every Saturday you allow me to use this. I have to use it. So then he's forcing me to accept the laptop with a condition that he can use it, which goes against the whole concept of buying and selling, because if that laptop becomes mine, that means that I should be able to do with it whatever I want. No one should be able to dictate to me how I should use this. Make sense? So putting a condition on there is not allowed. Yeah. Or for example, he says to me, I'll sell you this laptop on the condition that you do not sell this laptop to anyone else. Yeah, that's putting a condition, putting a burden on me, because now I can't treat it like a free item of sale. So he's like putting, a condition which goes against the contract. So this would also render the contract nullified. And number 3 is if the condition is for the product. There's no benefit in there for me, there's no benefit in there for the seller, but there is benefit in there for how, for example, like let's say the product is a slave. Yeah, and he says to me that you're not allowed to make the slave work on Fridays because it's Jummah. So there's no benefit there for me. There's no benefit for the seller. Yeah, but there's benefit for. So he's forcing me to do something with it, which he's like a third person from outside dictating to me how I should use this. Make sense? So these three things would nullify the contract immediately. Okay. The 5th type is where it goes against the condition set, goes against the contract. However, there is, and it's not accepted by the society. However, there is no benefit in there for anyone at all. Not for me, not for the seller, not for the item. For example, like if I go to buy a car, and when I bought this car, the seller says to me, you have to wash this car every Sunday. And there's no benefit in there for me. Yeah, I have to pay money to get it washed. There's no benefit in there for the seller, unless obviously his car wash and he's getting benefit. And then there's no benefit in the car because the car is not living, so he can't benefit. So what happens here? This is called a shart batil. This is not called a shart. The other ones are called shart fasid. This one is called a shart batil, and a shart batil has no impact on the contract. It's just the condition is void, non-existent. Does that make sense? Everyone understand? Yeah.
Often you get people selling property here,
Yeah.
and there are restrictive covenants attached. So you can buy this shop, but you can't open a fish and chip shop here, or you can't open a restaurant here.
Yeah.
So that would be caught by this.
Yeah,
You
so
have to look at whether it's acceptable in society
So,
or not.
yeah.
It would be caught by this
That's it.
principle. Right.
So these kind of conditions that people stipulate, put on to this, like for example, there might be some sort of like a car, a very luxurious car or a watch, where the company will only sell it to you if you're of a certain type of person in society, and then they will tell you can't sell it to anyone else, or they'll file a case against you. There's things out there like that. So those will not be allowed, because then you're not allowing a person to freely buy and deal with whatever they want, because ownership is something which is a human right. Ownership is.
So what about listed buildings?
Yeah. So however, there are like exemptions if in society this is something which is considered to be acceptable. Like, for example, someone was to buy a property, like in Makkah, you're not allowed to buy property. That's a condition that the scholars set down, because if property is bought, it might be sold to a wrong person, yeah, and then that person might, take, usurp the land around Makkah, and then it causes problem for Muslims. So scholars can stipulate those kind of things. So in a government, in a society, if there are certain buildings which are part of the history of that society, and then it's going to cause people to abuse that, so then there is that scope for that. But this is why you have to look at how the society and how the government they deal with these issues. This is why it's very important to have a strong government, because a society that doesn't have a strong government, that has good morals and good ethics, then it's very difficult for the people to implement morals and ethics in their society. Very, very hard. You can do it like a very micro level, but at a macro level, this is where it helps. Anyway, look at this. So, man ba'a abdan, whoever sells a slave, ala, on the condition. So let's say, for example, like Brother Sajid, he sells a slave to Brother Shaheed. Ala an yu'tiquhu al-mushtari. On the condition, he says, I'll sell you the slave on the condition that you free it on Friday. You have to set it free. Yeah? Why is that not allowed?
He's putting a condition on the...
Yeah. He's putting a condition on him which goes against the contract. Unless, for example, like Brother Sajid was going to buy a slave to sell it to free anyway. Yeah? So therefore it's like that condition has no impact on the contract. Or yudabbirahu means, or he has, Brother Sajid says to Shaheed that I'm going to sell you this slave on the condition that you make the slave into a mudabbar. Yeah, in other words, you make a contract with a slave that he'll be free if he pays this much. Again, you're forcing him to do something which is. Oh, yukatibahu, yudabbirahu, katibu. Yudabbirahu means that, or you say to the slave that I'll sell you the slave on the condition you say to the slave that if you return from a journey or if you die, you're free. Yeah. So all these things are forcing the customer to do things which go against his rights in that item.
So the Mudabir is that not he gets free anyway when you die?
Yeah, if he says that.
That's one of the contracts.
Like Mukatab is the contract one. Yukatibu. Yeah, so Mudabbir is even if, for example, he's ill and he says, you know what, if I get better from this illness, make dua, get better. If I get better from this, you're free.
Oh, see, that's at any time.
Yeah. You understand that? Oh, ba'a amatan, or he sells a slave woman on the condition an yastawlidaha fal bay'u fasid, that he's gonna make her into an walad, meaning that he's gonna have intimacy with her, have a child, claim the child is his, and then that slave woman would now become an walad, where she receives the right of being freed after the death of the master. Yeah. Again, all these conditions are doing what? Putting restrictions onto the customer for no reason.
So this is the buyer saying,
Yeah.
I will sell you this slave woman, but you must make her.
That's it. وَكَذَلِكَ لَوْ بَاعَ عَبْدًا عَلَىٰ أَنْ يَسْتَخْدِمَهُ الْبَائِعُ شَهْرًا. Or for example like this. So Brother Sajid has a slave in his shop, and the Shaykh comes and he says, I'll sell you the slave on the condition that for the rest of this month, for the rest of February, yeah, the slave's got to work for me. You can take it after February. So he wants the money now, he wants the contract to be done legally now, but he wants to hand him over end of February. Yeah, again, that 1 month is his right. He should be able to do whatever he wants with it. He shouldn't be told, yes, if Shaheed says this after the contract's done, you know what, you keep the slave for a month. that's fine. After the contract, any sort of verbal agreement that you guys make, that's totally fine. But if you put that condition in the contract, no, not allowed. Because this is, like we said, the fourth type, where there is benefit in there for the seller. أو دارا على أن يسكنها البائع مدة معلومة. Or a house, for example, Brother Sajid's got a house, Brother Shahid wants to buy it, so Brother Sajid says to him, listen, I'll sell you this house on the condition that I can live in it, because I don't have a house at the moment. I can live until the end of February. Yeah, and even if Brother Shahid says it's fine, totally fine, I don't mind, not allowed. That contract is not allowed. Yeah, again, he's putting a condition onto him which goes against the.
Well, isn't that quite common nowadays, where someone sells a house and then they say, until I find a house?
You have to pay rent for that legally.
That's not. I mean, Islamically it's not allowed. I don't know in British law.
No, what happens here is the standard conditions are if you want to stay on after exchange,
Yeah.
you agree a rent. Even if it's notional, you pay.
Would that then cancel the...
So I sell you the house.
Yeah, so that would be a second contract.
Yeah.
So the first contract would be selling the house, and then you will make a contract with him
To
rent it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you just said to him, you know what? He says to you, can I just live in this house? I don't have any place to live. He goes, okay, you can live in this one. But legally, you don't have to. You can take him to court, and he'll be evicted.
Because I've had that once when we sold the house, the people in the house said they won't move until they find the house.
Yeah. So Islamically, that's not allowed.
But even here, it's not allowed. They can't insist on it unless they pay rent. You could have said, no, I'm not completing. You have to move out.
Yeah.
Or you pay me rent.
Is this just taking the money? Is it okay to agree that, okay, 1 month later you can have my slave and give me the money for it at that time? Is it wrong in the
Yeah,
fact
that's
that
called
you're
a-
taking the money?
That's called a promise transaction. So you're making a promise that you're going to do a transaction in the future. It's not binding. Yeah. So for example, like let's say you bought a mobile phone, and you want to use it for a while, and someone says, "Can I buy it off you?" You go, "Let me use it for a little while, then I'll sell it to you end of the month." And he goes, "Fine." So that agreement is not a contract. It's just a promise of a future contract, which is not binding. Okay, everyone understand that? So, ala an yaskunaha al-bai, on the condition that the seller is allowed to sell in this for a fixed period. Yeah, still not allowed. Or ala an yuqridahu al-mushtari dirhaman. Or for example, like this. Brother Sajid, he says to Shaheed, I'll sell you this house on the condition that you borrow me £10,000. I need £10,000. So I'm going to sell you this. So what has he done? So he's forced him to accept something outside the contract for the contract to be valid. And that's not allowed. Make sense? Okay. أو على أن يقرضه المشتري درهما, or on the condition that the mushtari gives as a loan 1 dirham to the seller. أو على أن يهدي له, or on the condition that he even gifts him something. For example, like he'll say, I'll sell you the house on the condition you give me a jacket as well. So the contract is on this money, but I also want you to give me something. So if that was part of the price, if the jacket was part of the price, that's fine. Yeah, the money and the jacket put together. But if he says the money is the contract, but on top of that I want you to give me something, like your jacket, that's not allowed. Because you're putting onto the contract something, or onto the customer something which is not part of the contract. So everyone understand that?
Unless the seller agrees to it, that I'll give you this through the kindness of my heart.
But that's not part of the contract. He can say, look, I'm not going to give you. Make sense? Okay. So all these kind of things, this is why sometimes you get contracts that people do certain contracts where they've kind of conditioned, put some certain conditions on the contract, buying certain things, especially like sometimes you buy, mobile phones or something else, and they've got certain conditions on there. So this is why so a lot of these things, if it's not accepted socially in the society, then it's not allowed. Yeah. Okay. Next. وَمَنْ بَاءَ عَيْنًا, whoever sells an item. For example, Brother Sajid, he sells a laptop to Brother Shahid on the condition, so he sold it today, and he's made the condition أَنْ لَا يُسَلِّمَهَا إِلَى رَأْسِ شَهْرٍ, he won't hand it over until the beginning of the month. Ra's al-Shahr, beginning of the month. So I'll sell it to you today, but I'll only give it to you beginning of February. You're not allowed. Why? Because the contract demands that the customer has access to the product straight away. Yes, if the customer says this, I'll buy it off you now, but you know what? I can't pick it up from you now because I'm going on holiday. Can I pick it up from you after I come back from holiday? And if he agrees, yes. If he doesn't agree, right? If he doesn't agree, then obviously he'll have to take it off him. Or if he says, I agree, but you gotta pay me rent for keeping it in my shop. So I'll give him rent for it. Yeah, so أن لا يسلم إلى رأس الشهر فالبيع فاسد. All these situations, transaction is fasid. Yeah, fasid meaning the contract is void. If it goes to court, the court will not recognize this contract. Okay. Now, can you give us some water, please?
I'll do it. Please stay. I'll do it.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, so
in all of these authorities, when you say whether society accepts it, so there may be different approaches from a fiqh point of view depending on where you live and what your norms are in your particular society.
So the conditions can vary from place to place. Yeah. Like for example, there might be some societies where a plastic bag you have to pay for it. They don't give it free. And some societies where they say it's fine. Okay, next. Look at this now. The next question comes, can you sell something where it has two parts to it, but one of the parts cannot be separated from it? Does that make sense? For example, like, if I have this chair, on top of this chair is this other seat on top, yeah? Can that be separated? Yeah. So can I sell this separate seat? Yeah, I can. It can be separated, isn't it? Yeah, it can be separated. But for example, like if it's something which is part of something which cannot be sold on its own, then you can't. For example, like this metal bar. If I could detach this metal bar, can I sell it separately? So let's say I can separate it. I separate it. Can I sell it? But let's say I broke it up into pieces. Can I sell it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can.
If it's got any use to the
it's got use.
isn't it?
Yeah, I can. Yes, what you're talking about is like the beam in the roof, isn't it? If it's going to harm the building. But let's say I've already cut it. So there's no further harm. Yeah.
So you're selling something that the chair is no good without.
There might be a market for these, just like car parts.
Just the handle part, I say.
Yeah, so this maybe there's like people that just want to buy this. Okay, so the rule basically is this: something that cannot be separated from the other thing, right, is not allowed to be sold separately. It has to be sold all together. So what does this mean? For example, let's say there's a cow, and this cow has a fetus. That fetus, whilst it's a fetus, can I separate it from the cow? No, I can't. So because I can't physically separate it from the cow, I can't sell it separately. Do you understand that? But for example, like milk in a cow, can I sell milk in a cow? Because you can easily separate it, isn't it? But once I separate it, now I can sell it. If this fetus is born, can I sell it? Yeah, I can sell it. That's the rule basically. So anything that can easily be separated can be sold. But if it cannot be separated, so وَمَنْ بَاعَ جَارِيَةً, whoever sells a slave woman, or دَابَةً, or an animal, إِلَّا حَمْلَهَا, except for the fetus. So in the contract it's written down, I will sell you the cow except for the fetus, i.e. the fetus belongs to me. Transaction not allowed. You either have to sell both or none. فَسَدَ الْبَيْء. Everyone got that?
So is this really in the context of a pregnant animal or a woman really? Mainly?
Yeah. So they basically use it for, they'll say something like, something which cannot be exempted from something else cannot be sold separately. That's the rule. Yeah. So generally, if something cannot be exempted, two things have to come together. They must come together. Okay. So next, let's say for example, brother Sajid. He is a tailor, and he also sells cloth. So brother Shahid's gone to his shop. He's selected a cloth, and he said to brother Sajid, he said, I want you to cut this cloth for me. And we did this masala before, we did an Aib. I want you to cut this cloth for me, make it into clothing for me. Is that allowed? Yeah?
Not if it's in the middle of the
So he goes to the cloth and he says, no, this is cloth. He said, he buys a cloth and he says, I'm going to buy this cloth of you on the condition that you also cut it for me. Is that allowed?
No.
Yes, because that would be normal part of the transaction, wouldn't
Yeah, if it's the normal society, if that's how they deal with these things, then it's allowed. So in the society, if that's how it works, it's fine. Sometimes you go to a shop, you'll buy a jubba or a shirt or trousers, and they might even have their own tailor. And you take it to them and say, look, I'll buy it off you if you can fix this part. I'll buy it off you if you can make it according to my size. Yeah? Can you just get that? Does that make sense? Because in society that's accepted, you can do it. Make sense? But if it's not accepted in society, and you're forcing someone, like for example, you buy a car and you say to the seller, you say, look, I'll fix this if you spray all of this car. Yeah, spray the back of the car or change the wheels and I'll buy it off you. Does that make sense? So then that contract is not allowed.
But if you went to a shop that just sold cloth, didn't have a tailor, and said, I'll buy this cloth provided you cut it for me into a jubba shape,
Yeah, or
and then I'll take it somewhere else to a tailor,
Yes.
and that's not normally done,
yeah.
that would be void.
Or this, that some people might do this. Like you might go to Tesco and say, look, I'll buy this frozen food of you if you guys put it in the microwave for me, heat it up for me, yes, I can eat it. Tesco's probably wouldn't do that.
Whereas service stations, they usually sometimes
Yeah,
have a microwave
service stations
where
probably
they
allow
let you
that.
do it.
So you know, you said it's not part of society. Can you also add to the it's not part of the, it's not normal for the shop?
Mm.
Can you say?
Yeah, I mean socially in society. Society meaning that, like for example, society does not mean that everyone in society has to be doing it. It's those businesses that do it.
What's the normal?
So man ishtara thawban, whoever purchases a cloth, like Shaheed purchases a cloth, ala an yaqta'ahu al-ba'i, on the condition that the seller, he is going to cut it. He goes, I'll buy it off you as long as you're going to cut it. Wa yakhitahu qamisan, and you sew it into a shirt for me. Or qaba'an, or like an overcoat. Or na'lan, or I'm going to buy these slippers off you as long as you put laces into them, straps on them. Yeah. Or yashrakaha, yashrik means to put laces. In all these conditions, bay's fasid, because in them days it wasn't recognized as a normal thing. It was like a separate thing. People do it separately. So you go to one guy, you'd buy off him the cloth, and you go to another guy, or maybe that's his other business that he's got. Everyone understand?
So this one I'm translating Al-Na'lam ala yahzuha, sandal or slipper, upon the condition that he cuts it out.
Yeah. So hadhu means to make it fitting onto your foot.
Or,
Yeah. So they basically would take the sole, they would take your measurement, and they would cut it for you.
And then yashrukaha means laces or straps.
Lace, sharak, yeah. Okay, next. I mean, it's like, for example, say you go to a place that sells tires, and you say to them, I'll buy it off you as long as you put it onto my car. If they do that, if the garage does that, and they even put air into it for you, right, that's fine, because people charge you for putting air into your car. But if that whole everything comes with it, and you can even ask them for extra things, or can you wash the tire as well? Can you do this to it as well? Yeah, then it's fine. Yeah. Okay. Now next, this is another type of issue that affects contracts. Remember I said to you before, making a contract and stipulating a particular time which is known is allowed. So for example, just like Brother Sajid mentioned, like I want to sell something, but let's say I want to sell it on Friday, not today. I need it now. Is that allowed? Yeah, that kind of is allowed. But if the date that you stipulate is unknown, then that's not allowed. Why? Yeah, uncertainty. So for example, like if I say this, that okay, I'm gonna sell you my laptop when Imam Mahdi comes. Yeah. So how long are you waiting for? Might cause a fight. The guy might go old and start dying and still not turned up. So he says, وَالْبَيْءِ إِلَى النِّيرُوز وَالْمَهْرَجَانِ وَصَوْمِ النَّصَارَى وَفِطْرِ الْيَهُودِ. So selling to, in other words, selling, stipulating a date to Neiroz وَالْمَهْرَجَانِ وَصَوْمِ النَّصَارَى. So what's Neiroz? Neiroz is the spring festival of the Persians, and Mahrajan is the autumn festival. Yeah, so the Majus, the fire worshippers, they have this concept which is called the Neiroz. Neiroz means no, new, rose, day. It's Persian. So basically what happens is when the sun reaches a certain constellation in the sky, Aries, he reaches Aries, that's when their spring starts. So there's no fixed time for it. It all depends upon, in them days, the sightings. Yeah, so there had to be observations of the sun in a particular constellation or rising in a particular way, and then they determine if Neiroz starts. So it starts at different times depending on the constellation. So general masses wouldn't know this. This wouldn't be known to everyone. But nowadays, for example, like it's all calculated now. So you just have to Google it and you'll know exactly when dates are. Or Mahrajan. And Mahrajan is the same thing, but this happens in Libra. When the constellation, when the sun, it rises in Libra. So these are times that the masses wouldn't know these dates. Nowadays, obviously, calculations and everything kind of tell us. Okay, so Sawm Nasara. Sawm Nasara, again, the fasting of the Christians is something which the masses don't know exactly when it starts. So they're told by the clergy, they tell them. Yeah. And the Fitr al-Yahud, so the Jews know exactly when their fasting starts, but they don't know when it ends. They're the opposite. Okay, so because of this, what's going to happen? It's going to cause fights. Yeah, if, for example, in our society we have a particular thing which the date isn't known, right? Then that would also not be allowed. If the date is known, then it would be. For example, if I said, I'll sell you this on the day that
Ramadan starts.
Ramadan starts, possibly, but the thing with the Ramadan starting is it's only like a 1 or 2 day thing. It's not really a big issue. So this has to be a bit more uncertainty. Maybe like if a particular person was to be born or a particular person was to die. إذا لم يعرفا المتبايعان, when the buyer and seller, the mutabayi'an, do not know that particular date. If they do know that particular date, then it's fine. But otherwise, if they don't know, ذلك فاسد, then this is a fasted transaction. Okay, what about this then? So because these kind of texts were written in the agricultural age, what used to happen was people used to, grow things. So when you grow things, cultivate land, what happens is there's certain stages. So you have the harvesting is known as hasad. So you don't exactly know when hasad is going to take place. You roughly know the month, but you don't know exactly when. You can't put a date on it. So if someone's supposed to, if Brother Sajid will say, I'll sell you the car when the people start harvesting the rice. So when is that? He's in waiting. Not allowed. Or diyas. Diyas is when you take wheat and they throw it and they get cows and they walk over it. And it separates the flour from the husk. Yeah, this is called diyas. And qitaf. Qitaf is when they used to pick fruit. So all these dates are not known. Wa qudum al-hajj, in them days when the hajis used to return. So because they never have means of communication, like we have today. So if a haji was returning, you roughly would know when he's going to return. Maybe after hajj is coming. Maybe a week after, 2, 3, 4 months after. maybe 5 months after. So Qudum al-Hajj. Nowadays we know, because it's pre-booked from before. It's based on flights. So you know exactly. So nowadays it wouldn't be a problem. Okay. Now let's say, for example, we know all these kind of transactions that are done are not allowed. But let's say, for instance, such a transaction was done, and despite it being done before that date came, they dropped it. The buyer and seller dropped that clause from the contract. Then what?
The date clause.
Yeah. They said we'll just do it now, or we'll do it on Friday, we'll do it.
Okay, it's effectively a new
Yeah.
contract.
Because it's not going to affect, it's not going to cause a fight. So, فَإِن تَرَاضَيَا, if they both were to mutually agree, بِإِسْقَاطِ الْأَجَلِ, by dropping the date, those 4 things, قَبْلَ أَنْ يَأْخُذَ النَّاسِ, before people started to harvest with diyas, وَقَبْلَ قُدُومِ الْحَاجِ جَازَ الْبَيْء, permissibility of the transaction. Everyone got that?
What if you said something like, I'll buy this from you or take delivery on the next full moon?
But that's known, isn't it?
So that would be okay.
I mean, you could just go Google and find out when's the next full moon. They will tell you that. They could tell you that, the next 10 years. Okay, so nowadays, because everything's precise, these books were written when there was no clocks. These books were written, Masail were written when there was no printing machinery, there was no computers, there wasn't all this technology. So things were not as precise as they are today. Today, they're extremely precise things are. So a lot of these Masail would be different now. So like I said, this is why you need to, when you read these books, you need to study these books with someone who's trained in fiqh. Because when you study from someone who's trained in fiqh, what happens is that because they've got past experience with advanced books and they understand how it's applied, that they would know that, okay, this masla, what we take out this masla for today's times is like this. Does that make sense? So when you study a madhab, a school of thought, even though the masail which they would have registered in their books would have been masail based upon their society, you need to know their society, how it worked, and why they came out with those masail for answers, and then you need to know how it applies in today's society and what changes need to be made to it. Based on that. Okay, so, and I'm sure that's similar to, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, next. Let's say a bait fasid. Remember we said there are 2 types of invalid transactions. A batil bait, it's totally wrong. And there's a fasid bait. Let's say, for example, a fasid bait, one of the things that we mentioned early on, these 2 did it. Yeah? They were happy with it. They didn't mind. A fasid one. They made a contract, they signed it, and they even carried out the whole contract, and they exchanged items, everything was done. Legally, does Shaheed become the owner of the item, and does Brother Sajid become the owner of that cash, the money? Does that make sense? So he says, إِذَا قَبَضَ الْمُشْتَرِي الْمَبِي, when Shaheed, the mushtari, takes possession of the mabi, fil bay' al-fasid, in a contract which is fasid, bi-amr al-bay', with the permission of the, so he's happy with it, with his consent.
The seller.
Yeah, seller. وَفِي الْعَقْدِ إِوَضًا, and in that transaction there are 2 exchangeable items on both sides. So basically it's ticking off all the boxes. كُلُّ وَاحِدْ مِنْهُمَا مَال, and both these 2 items are legally considered to be mal, wealth. مَلَكَ الْمَبِي, each person will be considered to be, or Shaheed would have owned the mabi. وَلَزِمَتْهُ قِيمَتُهُ, and he would have to hand over its value. Qima, not, what word did you use here? Not what?
Not the agreed price.
Not the agreed price.
The value of it.
So if he's clever, he'll know. He wouldn't have to give the thaman. He'd have to give the market price.
Retail price.
The market price, not the retail price. So he might have said, I'm selling this laptop for £500, but the market price is 450. So if he's clever, he'll say, I'm not giving you, I'm giving you 450. And if they both go to court, the courts will say that he's right.
So what's an example of that one in today's time? That's something that's not batil, but it's fasid.
Right? So all the things that we just mentioned, they're fasid today.
Okay, so the batil ones are just the initial ones that we said, like
Yeah.
wine and blood and.
Yeah, those are batil.
Okay, and the rest of the other things are fasid.
Fasid, yeah. So basically, if you want to understand the difference between batil and fasid, batil is where the core elements in the transaction are totally contrary to Sharia. And fasid is where the core elements are fine, i.e. they are legal wealth, but the problem is the condition they're in.
Is it still sinful for a fasid or no?
It's sinful, yes, it's sinful. Yeah, it will be sinful, but legally, it'll go through. Now, you see, the benefit of knowing this is, for example, if on a mass scale people are doing transactions, fasid transactions, and they didn't know about this, and they've been doing it for years, then that wealth being handed over and then sold on to other people would be fine. It'd go through.
So can you just clarify this again, where you give back the qima, not the thaman.
So he is
This basically the seller is taking the full price, and he gives back the reduced.
no he. So when you gave him, remember, when you sell an item,
Sold him,
you have to hand over the product first.
I've given him the product.
Now it's his turn to give the money now.
He's given me the full.
No, he hasn't given it yet.
Oh, this hasn't been.
Yeah, give it.
Oh, I see. I think that's that.
Everyone understand?
Money is an exchange.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understood halfway. So first bit was two people who do the exchange of the fasid, which is agreed in everything,
Yeah.
and then when it comes to item in both, and they're both the items of mal, then after that it's malak al mabiyah, that bit I can understand.
So you will become the owner of the laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah, malaka al-mushtari al-mabi, and lazimathu, and shaheed will it become lazim and shaheed. It become incumbent on shaheed to hand over its value.
So I have to give it
Yeah.
money now.
But
Yeah.
not the price you agree, but it's market.
Not the shop price, but the
Oh,
market
I
price.
see.
So this masla would make sense if, for example, like you gave the laptop, right, and you said, I'm going to give you the money in two weeks' time, and he agreed. 2 weeks' time came, he didn't get the money, you went to court, right? Then the court would force him to give, not.
Oh, I see. In that case, where he's being forced to.
Yeah, if you hand it over voluntarily, then none of this is an issue.
The next question, for fasid transactions, if you know you're doing a fasid transaction,
Yeah.
do you still need to give that money away, or can you keep it like in batil? We said you should give the money away.
Yeah.
So just say if you know you're doing a fasid transaction,
Yeah.
is it still binding upon you to get rid of that money?
No. Then it's yours.
Okay.
That's yours, that is. Okay, everyone understand that? وَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِنَ الْمُتَعَاقِدَيْنِ. However, each of the muta'aqidain, this is so because this is not like a normal transaction. In a normal transaction, what happens is that when you make the transaction, it becomes binding upon each person, and they can't break the transaction unless they do iqala, unless they mutually decide to break the contract. In this case, in a fasid, likulli wahid, each person has the right to break the contract. So, for example, let's say Shaheed, brother Sajid, he decides, you know what, this is wrong, this is. So he goes to court and tells the court, you know what, I'd like to break the contract. The courts will summon Shaheed, will tell him that, look, he wants to break the contract, give the money back and have your item back without any reason. But in a normal contract, if you go to the shop, buy a chocolate bar, and you go and you pay the money, you cannot, even if you go court, you cannot get your money back unless mutually you agree to break the contract. So لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِنَ الْمُتَعَاقِدَيْنِ, and each of the muta'aqidain has the right to nullify the contract. However, look, if each of these people were to take the item and the money they had and to go and use it somewhere else, then they cannot break the contract, because now someone else is involved now. Yeah, so then it goes through. So Shaheed bought the laptop and now he's gone and sold it to his cousin, right? You can't take it to court now, you can't get the money back. So it becomes binding once it goes into someone else's ownership. فَإِنْ بَاءَهُ الْمُشْتَرِي, if the mushtari, Shaheed, goes and sells it to someone else, نَفَذَ بَيْءُهُ, transaction legally becomes binding, that's it now. So that's where the limit you have before a fasid transaction now becomes normal. Everyone understand that?
We have the same principles in contract law, English contract law, but fasid is called voidable and batil is void. So one is void, it just doesn't exist as a transaction.
Like what kind of things do they consider voidable?
Voidable, there's all sorts of different transactions. So they're mainly regulated though. For example, Consumer Credit Act,
Okay.
buying and lending, and if you don't
What,
have the right
what about that?
licenses,
You know, when like now that they've got that credit card where
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can't put a charge on that.
yeah, that sort of thing. But usually there's legislation of some kind,
Okay.
some regulation or some legislation that says that you have to have a certain license, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. But those are voidable, so they're not void automatically. One or the other party can say, I don't want to, and you will be void. Void, on the other hand, is batil. It's not a valid transaction. So sale of drugs, prostitution, certain gambling, types of gambling, they are just void. There's nothing. There's no.
I wonder
validity
where
of
they
them.
got this from. You know, the other one was like, what's the transaction? You know, Islamic banking. See, there's lots of problems in Islamic banking. One of the problems is when they sell you a house, or when they want you ask for a loan, what they will do is they'll buy the house. Yeah, they won't give you the loan. They'll buy the house, and you buy the house off them.
Pay the rent or something.
Yeah, so that's how they, get around the riba issue, interest. So they're not making money from the money; they're making money from an asset. So one of the things they have is they make you pay monthly payments. So you pay monthly, and then when you get to your last payment, you make a promise that you will buy the rest of it off them. Yeah. So they have a clause in there which is, what if you can't make a monthly payment? Then what happens? So they say if you can't make you have to pay a penalty. So you see that's a problem. Why is that?
So give a condition. Yeah.
Because they're forcing you to do something that goes against the contract. How can you stipulate a third thing, right, between the two? Can't do that. That's not allowed. So this is a problem they have. So Mufti Taqi Usmani said the only way around that would be, because if you don't put that, if a bank doesn't put that, people are going to abuse the system and they won't be able to maintain, their business. So he said the only way around that is, remember we said that if the shart is a shart where one of the three benefit, buyer, seller, or the item, then it's fasid, isn't it? So what he says is you stipulate a penalty, but that penalty doesn't go into the bank, it goes into a charity. It goes to a charity. So then no one's the immediate contractor is not benefiting. But it still gets them to get the money in. So that's how he does it with some of the banks.
But doesn't that fall into the category of nobody benefits?
Then that condition is like, it doesn't affect the contract.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't affect the contract. So all these contracts, all you have to look at is how the components, how they're mentioned in the fiqh books, and you'll see whether they're permissible or not.
What about if the bank had a charity, a separate institution, but it was set up by them and they could put it into their...
Yeah, that's what he mentions. He mentions that. So he says, as long as they are not directly benefiting from that charity, because then it's just one entity.
Yeah.
So that's and you get these kind of problems in car financing as well. So in car financing, what will happen is the contract will be between you and them. But what will happen is when you sign the documents, in the small print to be written that you are going to allow them to lease a car, and they will take a loan out from the finance company by which they'll sell you the car. So it's not just between you and them. There's a condition in there as well, which is in small print. You don't have anything to do with it.
Is that financing or leasing what you're saying?
So it's financing they do.
Oh.
Yeah. So what they'll do is like you pay off in small amounts over a long period of time.